Good evening. I'm going to give you a chance to thaw out, but in the meantime, I'm going to let you know a little bit about the Black History Month events that are going to be upcoming. We are currently waiting for another one of the people on our panel, and so Pat Miller is going to keep an eye out for him, and so whenever he arrives, then the panel will get started. But in the meantime, I am Melanie Smith. I am a program coordinator in the Office of the Provost, and I'm also representing the Martin Luther King Jr. Planning Committee. We had two. I was on both committees. There was a community celebration and then there was the university celebration. And I was a member of those committees. I'm also a member of Delta Sigma Theta, one of the co-sponsors of this year's Black History Month events. And I'm going to go through the list so you know who else is sponsoring our events. And if you're a member of one of these groups, thank you for your support. And the list is the African American Studies Program, the Alliance for the Production of American PhDs in the Mathematical Sciences, the Athletic Department, Black Student Alliance, Carrie Chapman Catt Center for Women in Politics, Center for American Intercultural Studies, College of Agriculture, College of Human Sciences, College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, Committee on Lectures funded by GSB, Dean of Students, Margaret Sloss Women's Center, Mathematics Department, Multicultural Student Affairs, Music Department, Office of the President, Office of the Provost, Religious Studies Program, Student Union Board, Ames Community Schools, Ames Human Relations Commission, Boys and Girls Club of Ames, United Way of Story County, the YWCA, Ames ISU, Youth and Shelter Services, Greenlee School of Journalism and Communication, New Birth Baptist Church, and Connect Student Organization. So thank all of our sponsors for all of the events that are going to be coming up and have already occurred this month and next. Now, speaking of events, I would be remiss if I did not mention that we have some great events coming up. This is kind of the kickoff to Black History Month, so we're going to have, of course, tonight our panel discussion on 40 years of Black politics. But then on February 1st, which is Thursday, we're going to have a talk, 40 Years in the Wilderness, Martin Luther King and the Misdirection of the Negro. Jonathan Farley is going to be here talking about some of his work. And also on February 5th, we have Securing the Future, the Politics of Oil Dependence and Clever Ways to Kick the Habit. Understanding Islam, these are all of the lecture events. So some of them are Black History Month events and some of them are just some of the great events that Lectures always puts on. Again, Understanding Islam will be February 7th. How Can Sudan Be Saved is February 8th at 7 in the Sunroom. And then there's a Black History Month Gospel Choir Extravaganza February 9th. Some of the other ones, From Debt to Dollars, is going to be a really good presentation February 17th that a lot of the students hopefully will participate in. There's room for 100 students to register for that. All of these are going to take place in the Union, and they're all listed for you here on these yellow sheets, so please grab one on your way out. For our panel discussion tonight, again, the topic is 40 Years of Black Politics, and we have moderating Mary Sawyer, who is Iowa State University Professor of Religious Studies and co-founder of the African American Studies program. She actually participated in our community celebration for Martin Luther King Jr. Day and shared a very moving story about how she became involved in the civil rights movement. And with that, I think she's very qualified then to let us know a little bit about what she's gained over the years in regards to this topic, 40 years of Black politics. Also on his way is State Representative Wayne Ford. And we also have Marianne Spicer, who is president of the Des Moines-based nonpartisan political action group, Sisters on Target. And with that, I will let the panel get started. Well, we can start with Adam, I believe, and then. Okay.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Well, I'm going to introduce the topic of 40 years of Black politics, giving you some historical context for this subject. And then we'll hear from the other two panelists, and then we'll have time for some questions and discussion. More than one person has asked me what black politics has to do with Martin Luther King Jr. and the Civil Rights Movement? The answer is a whole lot. The Civil Rights Movement had two primary goals. The first was to abolish the Southern system of Jim Crow segregation. The second was to enfranchise African Americans in the South who were denied the opportunity to vote. The first goal was accomplished with the passage of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. The second was accomplished with the passage of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. Within 2 years, this act was producing results. People in their 80s and 90s were voting for the first time in their lives. In turn, African Americans were being elected to public office in the South. Thus, when we speak of 40 years of black politics, we are referring to the 40-plus years of black electoral politics since the Voting Rights Act was enacted. In focusing on the last 40 years, I do not mean to suggest that black Americans never voted and never had representation prior to this time. In fact, they did. More specifically, some black men did. Until 1920, of course, women, whether white or black, were not allowed to vote. As far back as the 1600s and early 1700s, however, free black men in the North, and even in some parts of the South, voted and held public office. Of course, the numbers of free black men were very small. And as the system of slavery became more institutionalized, even those few were denied the vote. Enfranchisement was a prominent issue in the abolitionist movement in the antebellum period, and became even more of an issue following emancipation. But President Lincoln favored black voting rights only for, quote, the very intelligent, end quote, and for those who had served in the Union Army. His successor, Andrew Jackson, left the matter to the southern states, where racist Southern Democrats enacted codes that effectively kept blacks from voting. Partly in response, so-called radical Republicans in the North, which today would be the Democratic Party, amended the Constitution to officially outlaw slavery, bestow citizenship rights on blacks, and guarantee the right of all men to vote. Southern states were required to grant suffrage to black men as a condition of being readmitted to the Union. Under the provisions of the Reconstruction Act of 1867, federal troops were deployed in the South to supervise voting procedures and make sure that, in fact, black men were able to vote. In just 1 year, 700,000 Southern blacks registered to vote. At the same time, in the North, only 5,000 of 50,000 eligible black men were registered to vote. Over the next 10 years, scores of African American men were elected to public office in the South at the local and state levels. 3 Southern states elected black lieutenant governors. 20 African Americans were elected to the U.S. House of Representatives, and 2 were elected to the United States Senate. By way of comparison, today there is only 1 black United States senator, but some 40 members of the House of Representatives and 1 black governor. But this moment of black political empowerment during Reconstruction was fleeting, coming to an end when federal troops were withdrawn from the South in 1877. Subsequently, Southern black men were disenfranchised through extra legal devices such as grandfather clauses, poll taxes, multiple ballot boxes, complicated ballot forms, literacy tests, and party membership criteria based on race. Many of these tactics were legalized through revisions of state constitutions and decisions of the U.S. Supreme Court. By 1901, not a single African American remained in Congress, and Southern blacks participated in politics at the local level only as it served the interest of white political parties. The situation in the North was not greatly different. Blacks continued to vote in the North after Reconstruction ended, and on rare occasions were elected to municipal and state offices. But they participated in spite of duress and intimidation. Political participation in the North was impeded by practices of vote buying, patronage, and corruption, the absence of effective black political organizations, and general prejudice against blacks. Not until 1928 was the first Northern black man elected to Congress. Major breakthroughs occurred in the South in the 1940s when various court decisions outlawed some of the tactics that had been used to disenfranchise blacks. By 1952, 1 million black voters were registered in the South, and a few were being elected to state and local offices once again. But the 1954 Supreme Court decision declaring the doctrine of separate but equal unconstitutional triggered a backlash in which tactics to slow black voter registration, including tactics of violence and intimidation, were intensified. It was in this context that the Civil Rights Movement began in 1955. One of the programs of the movement was the organizing of what were called citizenship schools. In these schools, illiterate adults were brought together in small groups where they were taught to read using the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights as their texts. In studying these documents, they not only learned to read, but learned their citizenship rights and how to exercise them. Some of the major campaigns of the Civil Rights Movement were focused on securing federal protection of voting rights. It was the violence that participants met as they attempted to march from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama, and the media coverage this violence received that moved Congress to pass the 1965 Voting Rights Act. This act once again assigned federal agents to monitor voter registration and voting processes in the South. Illegal tactics that had been used to keep blacks from voting were abolished by the courts and by constitutional amendment. From 1962 to 1967, black voter registration in the South increased from 21% to 62%. In 1964, there were only 280 black elected officials in the entire United States, out of a total of more than 500,000 elected officials. 10 years later, in 1975, there were over 3,000 black elected officials. Blacks were being elected to boards of education, to city councils and county commissions, to state legislatures, and to Congress. 2 African Americans were elected as lieutenant governors, and several were elected as mayors of large urban cities. Even before the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. in 1968, many civil rights participants were coming to see black political development as the second stage of the movement. Elimination of legal segregation was one thing, but actually securing equality in employment, economics, housing, education, and childcare was quite another. Changes in these arenas were a matter of public policy and a matter of reallocating economic resources. The only way to participate in making these changes was to be a presence in governmental bodies. For the next 10 years or so, most African American candidates for elective office were individuals who had been civil rights activists. A disproportionate number of these were ministers or other religious leaders. The civil rights movement, of course, was essentially a religious movement. Most of its public leaders, including Martin Luther King Jr., were ministers. Much of the movement was financed by black church offerings. The marches and demonstrations were organized in black churches, and participants recruited from black church members. These participants were inspired by black preaching and sustained by black prayer and music. The goal of justice was anchored equally in the founding documents of the nation and in Judaic-Christian scriptures. To a great extent, this has been true of black politics as a whole. Black politics, whether protest politics, radical politics, or electoral politics, has historically held up justice as the prize. This is so because black politics reflects the black experience in America. Black politics may be described as all forms of organized activity that seek to alter relationships of inequality and inequitable power distribution, or to transform social and economic systems and structures. Black politics refers to that body politic that is committed to precluding the fulfillment of racist and otherwise unjust national and international policies. By the early 1980s, as might have been expected, the religious civil rights connections of black political candidates began to diminish. Activists had grown older, and integration had diminished the influence of the black church. At the same time, these connections were exemplified by the two presidential campaigns in that decade of the Reverend Jesse Jackson, who had been an aide to Dr. King. Today, there are over 10,000 black elected officials, including significant numbers of women. This still constitutes only about 2% of all elected officials, while African Americans are nearly 14% of the U.S. population. And I would not want to leave the impression that it has all been smooth sailing. The 1965 Voting Rights Act is not a permanent piece of legislation, but rather is subject to renewal every few years. Particularly under the Reagan administration, there was great resistance to renewing the act, although it ultimately was renewed and has been since. But there is always the possibility that at some point in the future, it will be allowed to lapse. In addition, especially in the years from 1975 to the early 1990s, concerted efforts were made by various governmental bodies to discredit black elected officials by starting rumor campaigns, planting stories in newspapers alleging wrongdoing, and charging officials with criminal activities that rarely led to convictions but destroyed their reputations. Clearly, the acquisition of power by African Americans was considered a threat to white control and hegemony. In many ways, these have been the proverbial 40 years of wandering in the wilderness. Black politics has not led black or white Americans to the promised land, but neither has it left us captive in the Egypt of a segregated South and discriminatory North. Finally, I would not want to suggest that all black elected officials today, or in the past, practice black politics as I have defined it. One apparent pattern of the past 15 years is that some leaders of very large black churches were pulled into the conservative politics of the religious right. Another is that relatively more black candidates began running as conservative Republicans, publicly embracing the agenda of the religious right in order to obtain financial support. The overwhelming majority of black officials, however, are Democrats who practice the mainstream politics of their party, which at times are compatible with black politics. Perhaps we can explore these issues further toward the end of our program. But first we want to hear from, we hope, both of our other panel members, but we'll start with the one that's present, Mary Ann.
Good evening. It's been one of those days. You know, have you ever had a day and you're just saying to yourself, will anything go right? I do want to apologize for Representative Wayne Ford. He's at the State House, or was at the State House. They were debating a very important bill dealing with harassment and bullying. They just finished the debate at approximately 6:15, 6:20. He is en route on his way. So when he comes, if anyone knows Wayne Ford, he's a big, powerful, big guy. He's just going to be out of breath and everything else on his bum leg, and he's going to take a seat. Here he comes. I'm talking about his bum leg. Let's give him a round of applause. Let's see what we've been talking about. It was lost on him. Okay. Now we applaud. I just got through talking about you. I said you're going to be running here, coming in with your bum leg, but you'll be fine.
I played football, y'all. Many years ago.
One of the things I do want to add to my introduction is that I enjoy coming to Iowa State. I'm a former national officer of Zeta Phi Beta sorority. I was national first vice president, and I was national parliamentarian, so my sorority sister is sitting in the back there, and I appreciate you taking time out your busy schedule. Thanks for coming along. Also, I am a doctoral student at the University of Phoenix, about to receive my doctorate in December. And I did online. How many of you are familiar with online? Oh my gosh. When you're a non-traditional student and you do online, that's something else. I'm happy to be here to talk about 40 years of black politics. One of the wonderful things is that we get to play off of each other. Wayne Ford is a Democrat. I am a Republican. I happen to be president of Polk County Republican Women. I'm also on the national board of the Federation of Republican Women. I'm 3rd district president of the Iowa Federation of Republican Women. And I also serve as president of a nonpartisan organization that is politically active called Sisters on Target. Is America ready? For 220 years, Americans have elected only white male Christians. More barrier breaking is needed on this campaign trail. No one knows if we in Iowa are serious about leveling the playing field for women and minorities. On one side, the party can boast. We now have 4 African Americans in the House of Representatives, that is, in the Iowa House of Representatives. I would say we're somewhat serious. We have no racial minorities in the Senate. We're still perhaps not as serious as we could be. We have approximately 26 women in the Iowa House, with 2 being women of color and 1 from India, which makes 3. We are breaking some ground. We have 6 women in the Senate, no minorities. But we have backtracked, for there is still no visible minorities in some elected positions in the state of Iowa, except for a few. And I'm sure Representative Ford will talk about those. Perhaps we need a secret formula to unlock partisanship, a mixture that is broader than race. We're coming up on the dog years of politics. This is the year of intense campaigning before the primaries. Yet 40 years later, I still have concerns. There appears to be no minorities leading a major campaign in Iowa. Have you ever wondered why? There still appears to be doubts whether minorities possess the qualifications, even though some have graduated from the same school as those who are leading some of the more prestigious campaigns. There are those out there who have higher degrees. But some say, 40 years later, there's still not enough action in this regard. According to Newsweek poll, 86% of registered voters would vote for a qualified woman candidate for president. How about that? 86%. This is a new day because that same poll says 93% would vote for an African American. This is great improvement over a decade ago and certainly well over 40 years ago. I'd like to be optimistic, but I know what happens despite polls when we get inside the voting booth. The polls say you got these high percentage, we'll vote for this and we'll vote for that. Close the curtains and you know what happens. It may come true, it may not come true. The country is seeing polls to elect a woman before an African American. In the United States, where 51% of the population now includes 9 women governors, 71 women House members, 16 out of 100 in the Senate, race does matter 40 years later. African Americans represent 13% of the population. Minorities rarely serve as heads of our state in our country. Yet I must give credit to the American people who elected Douglas Wilder from Virginia. Recently, as mentioned here, Deval Patrick, Senator Edward Kennedy from Massachusetts. They must be doing something right because Patrick Duvall is from Massachusetts too. Obama, Illinois in the Senate. Carol Moseley Braun to the Congress. The only one the Republicans can claim during the 40-year period that I know of is J.C. Watts. He's from Oklahoma. And he's no longer in Congress. He got burnt out. There's still much work to do here in Iowa. So what is the problem? I would say to you, money is a problem for many minorities. Having powerful financial backers is another problem. And then there's one that shouldn't escape any of us, is that many that run for office want to have a winning ticket. So oftentimes, placing a minority on a ticket may not be a winning ticket on either side. Yet there's still willingness to be entertained by African Americans, but to be governed by them is completely another story. White men have socialized and worked under women. Yet there have been 2 Republicans that have changed the face of politics, even though it was for only a temporary period of time. Colin Powell and Condoleezza Rice. We don't know how well they're doing, but they have changed the face of politics. Until we as women stop being harder on each other, until the media stops worrying about hair and hemlines, until we as women stop demanding perfection of each other, those that peak the glass ceiling in Iowa may not break through. Nonetheless, 40 years of black politics has put us smack in the middle of dog days. Regardless of race, we women will be the ones to move society in the direction it should go. I was listening to a radio station today, and it was Rush Limbaugh. How many of you know about Rush? And I say this to Rush. Despite what Rush thinks, women are rational. We do read political magazines. We are gaining knowledge as to what is politically correct, and we will make a firm commitment for who will be the next president of the United States. I wish I could be as hopeful on both sides of the aisles for minorities. It is 40 years later, and by my watch, America is still not ready. Thank you.
Going to do a little detour here, and then we will hear from Representative Ford.
I left some of my coat pocket, so pardon my speech. Because I'm gonna need a lot to go get something pumping.
Well, I'm telling Jeff right there. Just talk about politics. Got it?
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. I've been in this room, I guess about 10 years ago. George Jackson brought me to this room to speak to the brothers and sisters at that time. Things never changed. And I'm just very happy to be here at Iowa State, the land of George Washington Carver. And when I think about your football stadium and the black man who gave his life for that, I mean, you all have a strong legacy, and I hope y'all know that. For you blacks out there, I'm from Washington, D.C., came out here to play football many years ago. All my black friends left and got out of this all-white community of Iowa. I stayed, and some of us do stay. Many of you brothers and sisters, I know you can't wait till you get your college degree to get out of here. The game ain't changed, just different players. But I was one of the guys who stayed. And I'm 55 years old, and I left Washington, D.C. when I was 17 in 1969. My first stop was Rochester, Minnesota, not too far from here. I was the only black on the football team at that time. Vision. Understand what I'm saying, y'all, because you better get ready, especially for those of you who go to college and want to get involved with politics and want to come up here and debate and do all those great things. If you got no vision, you're wasting your professor's time and you're wasting your time. Because people like me now, us baby boomers, we got about a 10 more year run for many of us start retiring at a great rate. We the ones who fought in Vietnam. We the ones who say make love, not war. You know, we the one who got you going for ecology. I know some of you me generations and younger people think that we didn't do anything, but read your history. Vietnam, we stopped the Vietnam War. You all got a war going on right now. How many of you all are marching? All right, a few, thank you. All right, but in my day, it's 1970s and the late 60s, everybody raised their hand. Either you were to the far left or you were to the far right. Now, before I talk about politics, there's a criticism among this younger generation. Some of you are going to get drafted and don't even know about it. Some of your kids are going to get drafted. For your history majors, the 100-year war, generation after generation fought the same war. Read your books. You are on the verge of a 100-year war. Any Muslim will tell you that. Now, my son is 30 years old, and he lives in California doing pretty well. I'm married to a beautiful woman who's a lawyer. If I started my journey now knowing this war was going on, I would try to plan my future. How you going to plan your future? Your grandchildren going to fight this war. Many things have happened. I wonder about this generation who came from, most of your mothers and fathers are the same age I am. I'm 55 years old. Some of your parents might be a little bit younger. But you're the baby boomers kids. And you stay on your computer now more than you watch about the war. So as I take you through a political journey that I went from, I hope one day some of you all, when you're 50, you get up here and you talk to a generation of people and you make them aware how beautiful it is to get a college education and how important you are to go back to your communities, whether it's the ghetto of D.C. or South Carolina or whites back to rural Iowa, it doesn't matter. You all got some major issues here now. Now, 40 years of politics, black politics, I know a little bit about it because I'm the one who changed the course of history here in Iowa. You got to believe and see your vision when you're young. I saw my vision when I was in the 8th grade. The teacher told me to write your obituary. Yes, that's true, y'all. Blacks were dying in big numbers in ghetto of D.C. back in the late, I was in the, 8th grade back in the mid-60s. So we've always had problems with those inner cities of those people. But I was told to write my obituary, and I'm glad I did. Here's what I said. I said, I'll be in the Midwest. I'll be in charge of a community center, and I'll be involved with politics. And upon my death, someone would name a building after me. I did that in the 8th grade. Vision. How could you leave an all-black city and come to an all-white state at 17 years old and have no vision? So for you brothers and sisters out there I know sometimes you criticize, I can't get no grease, I can't get no barbecue, or things ain't like it back home. You're the chosen people. I hope you take advantage of it because you're here to get a good education. And for you whites out there, if you go to 4 years and don't know no blacks, and you know how black the world is getting, and you know that Christianity is not the #1 religion in the world, I feel sorry for you. Where I come from, I know how it is in the cafeteria. I assume when nothing has changed since I was in school. White sits together and black sits together. I'm sure that ain't changed. I hope that some of you all got the gumption to go to another table and say, I don't know nothing about you, but I know over in that war now, it don't matter what color you are. So if you all can't start getting together here now, okay, y'all, you're going to write your own obituary. And think about what I'm saying. If you was told to write your obituary now, knowing there's a war going on, knowing that you ain't out there giving up all you can to make sure this world can be better, you meeting people, what is your obituary going to say right now when you write it? Are you going to change the course of time? Are you going to change the course of history? You are in a great state. Get ready for this. Now, this is going to be mind-boggling. I hope you took your medication. And in my day, medication didn't mean that, so we'll leave that alone. All right, baby boomers, stay with me. 1839, the great state of Iowa. You're in the 5th whitest state. Here's what happened in 1839. The Iowa Supreme Court rules that fugitive slaves in Iowa are free. Right. Stay with me now. Come on, you're in a square state, right? Where just white people don't care about nobody, right? Do you know what they were doing in 18? They were killing blacks and castrating them. We couldn't even hang together. But the state of Iowa, who fought for the North, Missouri fought for the South, 1839, go look in your libraries. I'm going to say it again. The Supreme Court said blacks are free and out. 1857, this is before Civil War. U.S. Supreme Court rules that fugitive slaves in free states and territories must be returned to their masters. Did many of you all know that Dred Scott was part of the Iowa situation? Dred Scott case, very powerful. 1968, get ready. Our Supreme Court rules that segregated schools are illegal. I'm going to say it again. Well before 54, well before Rosa Parks. I'm going to say it again. Now, I know y'all know what I'm talking about because I know most of y'all go to the library and you understand your history of not just wasting your damn time. So I know this can't surprise y'all because you have to tell me this ain't the first time you know this. If I'm going to be in a state and not know its history, you might as well get back on the bus. I'm going to say it again. 1868. Our Supreme Court rules that segregated schools are illegal, that blacks and whites can go to school together. And you talk about how square Iowa is. I wish I was that square. 1873, our Supreme Court rules that African Americans are entitled to equal treatment to public accommodations. 1873. Remember, y'all, there's no other state like Iowa. 1875, the Iowa Supreme Court rules that schools cannot deny admittance to African Americans. 1875, well before Rosa Parks of 54 and what happened in Arkansas. 1884, our Civil Rights Acts of 1884 prohibits discrimination in public accommodations. I can go on and on and on. For many of you out there, black or white, if this is the first time you're hearing this, you better go to your library tomorrow. Because no other state in America can say they was 100 years before Rosa Parks, besides Iowa. Now I know, to me, when I found out, I was calling my friends. Hey y'all, this is the promised land. This is the promised land. Why do we have more blacks living out here in Iowa? Look at the legacy. And no blacks was making this kind of law. So brothers and sisters, personal message to you, enjoy your journey and don't forget your history. And for you whites out there who might feel as though this man is making it up, ain't making it up. It means to me that your grandfathers and their grandfathers mean that you all are good people. I know I've served longer in the Iowa on Capitol Hill, longer than any black in the history of Iowa. No one has ever ran against me. I won my office in 1996. I've been going to my 11th year. And no one has never ran against me. So Ford, what are you talking about? 40 years of politics. We're in a racist state called Iowa. Whites don't care for blacks and all that. No one. Georgia can't do this. D.C. can't do this. There's no other state in the country can do this. What's your purpose, Ford? Because 40 years of politics mean it couldn't have happened without us being together. The Iowa caucus started in the late 60s. Oh, why you want to go to an all-white state? Y'all hear it now. Ain't no minorities in Iowa. They don't get along. Come on. And in 1976, Jimmy Carter walked the streets of Iowa. I know I worked for him. When I was your age, I was his minority education leader. I traveled the state in a Volkswagen with a Jimmy Carter sign. And no one never hurt me in those little small towns in Iowa. It's a unique place called Iowa. Jesse Jackson ran in 1984 and almost won the Iowa caucus. During the time of the Iowa farm prices, Jesse Jackson went to the farmer in rural Iowa and said, you know what, I feel your pain. My mother lost her farm. My grandparents lost their farm. I feel your pain. Jesse Jackson and farmers were together in 1984, and he almost shocked the world. He came in number 3. He almost shocked the world, 1984. You have a lot to be proud of. And I think about Edna Griffin. If you don't know about Edna Griffin, 40 years of politics. Stay with me now. You need to read about her. Little short lady. She was having some ice cream. It was real hot in Des Moines in the late 40s. She said, let's go in the Cat's drugstore because I want to get my son some ice cream. And I had a flashback when I was young. My aunt used to take me to the store, get an ice cream. I say, Aunt Christine, I want strawberry. The sun was hot. I was young. I had somebody take care of me. Some of y'all know what I'm talking about. We all are still babies, ain't we, in so many ways. Some of y'all flash back to that ice cream. And she went into a store. Now, she didn't know it said we don't serve colors. Because even in a good state, there was still some white resistance. But that's okay. Follow my journey. But she said, wait a minute. I want to serve my ice cream. Ice cream. It's hot. I need some ice cream. They said, no, we can't serve you because we don't have any machines that can make ice cream for niggas. Oh, man. Again, one little small person. What did she do? She got mad. She got mad. And she began a journey to sue Cat's Drugstore. 5 years before Rosa Parks, she sued and she won. A little black woman said, I will feed my kid ice cream. And she won well before Rosa Parks. I had a beautiful journey for me because I talked to Rosa Parks before she died. And I was going to try to bring these two icons together. And the great Rosa Parks said, Representative Ford, I wish I would have met this lady. Because in the South, we had blacks, we had King, we had Martin Luther King, we had black men who would fight back. Because we had a bunch of blacks in the South. She said what she did in an hour, where they could have killed her right there on the spot, was legendary. And she was a black woman. Her name is Edna Griffin. So when I walk around here in Iowa, or on Capitol Hill, I feel so honored that God has put me in a state like this. I think about other things when I think about the situation of brown and black and all that there. I started my journey in 1976 when I organized the first brown and black, Concerned Citizen for Minority Affairs Presidential Forum. That was in 1976. What happened? I got pissed off. The Des Moines Register told me I couldn't come to their forum. For you younger people out here, there's only 4 or 5 major forums in Iowa. Before mine, there was 3. The National League of Women Voters and Des Moines Register. There was 2. Then I created the Brown and Black. It's on NSBC, Soledad O'Brien, Smiley. Everybody's covered my event. And so it makes about 4 or 5 more months you'll hear about it. So read the paper and you'll see my face again because Obama, Hillary Clinton, they all got to come to my house because it's my forum. Some of y'all know what I'm talking about. I'm just one person who left school, who couldn't read and write, but had a vision. Because God told me that you're going to come to Iowa and you're going to make an impact. But I was already ready for me because I wasn't born. My grandmother wasn't born when y'all was saying, let my people go. So I owe a lot to Iowans and to the white Iowans when I go around the country and speak up. And people say, Ford, how does it feel to be in a racist state? I start reading this. I've seen people cry when I read this. No other state has this kind of legacy. In 1984, I started the Brown and Black Presidential Forum, the oldest ongoing minority forum in the country. And I'm very happy to do that, but I just got mad again. How I got mad was the Des Moines Register said you couldn't come to the forum. I said, okay, being out of D.C. and that D.C. mentality back in the 80s, I said, I'm going to start my own forum. So the first forum I did it in the neighborhood, in a neighborhood nightclub. I told the guys, you can't carry your guns today. You can't come in today. We got people come from all around the state of Iowa to this presidential forum. There was no gangs, no anything. They came down to the hood. Jimmy Carter, all the people, 1976, Jimmy Carter and Birch Bayh was running at that time. And then in 1984, I did the same thing for Jesse Jackson, when Jesse Jackson ran in 1984. And we've been doing those things ever since. Howard Dean used to like me until Al Sharpton asked him a critical question at my last forum. Some of you might remember, Al Sharpton asked Dean a question, Howard Dean. Hey, Dean, you talk a good game. I'm a black man running for office, president. I'm worthy. Dean, you're in Vermont, a very white state. Have you ever had any minorities or Latinos work for you? And Dean couldn't answer the question. And Kerry took Iowa. One question can make you or break you about race. Some of you are talking about, we got a good game, you got a good heart. If you got no background, that shows you really care for the other people. And remember, blacks are just as racist as whites. Nobody has an idea. This ain't a gift. I know blacks who are mad about Mexicans, and because they feel as though they're taking the jobs. Race issues is the thing that keeps us apart, not together. Only time we come together in this country in situation of race is during a national war or a national disaster. Down in Des Moines in the early 90s, we had a situation where we had a flood. I saw blacks and whites and dope addicts and everybody in line, taking showers, doing everything, because we had no water. We was all the same, dirty and funky, if you follow my flow. So sometimes do we need a war to make us even? Do we need a natural disaster to recognize the poor man is no different than the rich man at times? He got to clean his body. You all got a big challenge. I worry about y'all. Because when I see march, I see two people raise their hand. You're getting a little bit too laid back, y'all. If my son was going to a war, I'd be fighting like a dog right now. So I'm letting you know, when you talk about 40 years of politics, you're in a state now that can take you to many elements of greatness. And as I close here, because again, I just get emotional about this, and you never gave me how much time. I never knew how much time anyway, you know. But I got to give you a little short journey about me and this great lady here, Mary Spicer. She's Republican. I'm a Democrat. We just put a forum on, the Brown and Black Governors Forum, where she had Nussle and I had Chet Culver. And they bashed and they fought about who's the best for all the people. The first time in the history of the Iowa caucus, of this Iowa politics, that a Republican and Democrat talked about minority issues. And we did it in the fifth whitest state. Chet Culver won. And the first thing he said was, on Martin Luther King Day during his inauguration, he said 1 hour. His legacy, remember now, he's born in the 60s. Baby boomers, our time is about over. He was born in the 60s. Obama was born in the 60s. Obama and Chet Culver don't think like us baby boomers. You know? They didn't have, we had Korea War. Our parents just came out of World War II. We had the suburbs. Our whole dynamics were different. And because of that, I think Iowa will make history this year. I think Hillary Clinton has a chance. I think Obama has a chance. I think Edwards has a chance, because Edwards told me personally, Ford, if I'm going to win, I better talk about poverty. I said, Senator Edwards, you're damn right. And right now, in Iowa, Edwards is leading Hillary Clinton. Only place in the country where Hillary Clinton is behind. It's right here in Iowa. So I'm going to start off again, y'all. It doesn't surprise me that 60% of people in Iowa say a black man can be president. It doesn't surprise me because, again, y'all, in 1839, the Iowa Supreme Court rules that fugitive slaves in Iowa are free. Power to the people.
Thank you, Representative Ford. We'll have opportunity now for comments, questions. Don't be shy.
Is that Garrison sitting in the audience? Now you're a legacy, Garrison. That's Garrison's grandson.
Oh, okay, right on. Yes. People, it was Congressman up there, yes.
You know about politics. You heard about it. Oh, yeah, a lot about it. Garrison was a great person, representative from that.
Yeah. Waterloo, right? That's right.
Yeah, good.
You mentioned only 14 blacks that ever served in the state. I was number 10. I served by myself, now we got 3 more. We got 14. Times are changing. And his people was, I think he served in the 60s or early 70s. He was by himself.
Kerry?
Would you talk about being a black Republican? It's an exciting position.
Oh, my. It's perhaps the most difficult position, but I got to tell you a story. I, too, am from the South. I'm from Waco, Texas. I can remember when my mom would go and vote, and she would take me with her, 7 of us, and I was interested in politics even at an early age, and so she would take us to go with her, and we walked into the courthouse. And I saw all the white people going to the right, then I saw the black folks going to the left. And I said to Mom, why can't we go to the right? She said, you can't go to the right. I said, why? She said, you just can't go to the right, we go to the left. And so she voted, going to the left. I said, Mom, when I grow up, I'm going to go around the corner to the right and see what's on the right side. Little did I know that was where the Republicans were going. They were going over there to vote. And so on my 18th birthday, when I registered to vote, I registered as a Republican. Just because of that story. I just felt that all blacks didn't have to go to one side. That we were free to mix and mingle and go to either side. I come to Iowa, and I still run into opposition because I don't agree with all the platform items that we in the Republican Party have. For instance, I disagree on affirmative action. I am black. I haven't forgotten that I'm black. So we do disagree. I can remember we were sitting in a session, and this was in 2004, and we had individuals from the rural area. They were going to add a long, lengthy item to the plank dealing with affirmative action that was very negative. It was about 150 people. I stood up and I said, I thought we were beyond this. Do you know what you're doing to a group of people? You want to marginalize them more. And I object. They turned around and stared at me and said, aren't you in the wrong precinct? And you know what? It turned out I was, but I still had my say. And then I moved on to another place. But it's difficult being a Republican. One of the most difficult things is that you're not accepted by your own people. Blacks look at you and say, you're a traitor. And say, how can you be a part of the Republican Party? Something that hates blacks. And you stand your ground and you look and you say, there are some platform items that I do agree with. There are some that I disagree with. The same as in the Democratic Party. I don't think we have to put all our eggs in one basket. We really don't. We need all people on all sides to cover all bases. I'm just as proud to be on the side sometimes of a Republican, but then I wish I was over here on the winning side because I am on the losing side. But yeah, I think we as a people have a lot to offer. And besides, somebody got to monitor the other side.
Other questions?
In your speech, I guess, you said America is still not ready. What can we do to make America ready?
Representative Ford just gave you a message. We're not ready because you, the young people, are so lethargic. You're sitting on your cans. You got to get off your keister. You got to get active. When I grew up in the 60s and the 70s, like Representative Ford stated, we were marching. We had Angela Davis had just done something somewhere, and we didn't know much about Angela Davis in college, but you know what? In Denton, Texas, we took over a Jack in the Box, protesting because Angela Davis was arrested. You got to find your issue. Make noise. Just don't sit there. You know, this book stuff is great. You know, you get all the intelligence and everything, but to make things happen, the only thing people understand is action. It's action. You can change things. You're the younger generation. We're almost done here. I'm burnt out. You know, Wayne got one bum leg, I got another bum leg, and we burn out. We need your help. We need for you to be more proactive.
Go ahead.
Do you have any suggestions to how we can begin to mobilize people, the younger generation, for a cause?
Well, where you from originally? Where you from? We're doing this like that. You have one of the greatest black leaders in the world, Mayor Washington. When Mayor Daley got together, he was the first mayor back in the 60s. He got the Blackstone gangsters, the gangs, and got the gangs federal contracts. So you come from a city of legends. I always think that question's within. Everybody can't do what we do. Number one, it's risky. People might don't hire you and all that. But you can always do something when you have a comfort zone. You might don't want to be on the front lines like me and this lady here. But you can do things when you see kids out of line. You can do things when you see parents. There's so many things you can do. Remember the African proverb, it takes a community? And everybody can't do what I can do. I mean, when I played football, I played defensive tackle. I couldn't do what the quarterback could do. I couldn't do what the flanker could do. I did my part. My greatest situation to you by you being in college, you know your strength, you know your weakness. Play your strength, and the rest will come.
As Representative Wayne Ford stated, find your passion. For instance, I'm into education. For the last 6 years, I have monitored the Des Moines School Board. I've gone there, sat in the audience, listened to the issues, and when I disagree with something, I go and do my homework, research it, then I come back and make sure I'm on the podium speaking against that particular issue. Finding an organization that's doing something that speaks to your passion. If there's no organization in Ames, Chicago, Texas, or wherever you're from, create your own. Wayne created the Brown and the Black. That was a very powerful movement. You don't have to be a part of something already started. Create your own passion.
Yes, go ahead.
Sanchez.
Yeah, first of all, I just want to say, I love both of you all. Deep admiration for your work. But I was paying particular attention when you made reference to how great the state of Iowa is. And I agree. It has a wonderful history. But how do you explain, for instance, the educational and economic health disparities that are going on today if it's not about race, prejudice, or bigotry?
You're right. I mean, just because we came from a good foundation here in Iowa doesn't mean that we all don't have to work. I think what happened here in Iowa could be the example because there's a reason why we started the presidential election. I think blacks in Iowa have not taken advantage of something because one thing about me and Mary and I know Dr. George Jackson is not, none of us are from Des Moines. None of us are from Iowa. When I used to do wrong back in the ghetto of D.C., if you came in my neighborhood, I would bust you in the head with a brick. Because you couldn't come in my neighborhood. You sure couldn't come in my neighborhood and do it and act like you own it. Iowa, if we together from the outside, blacks who came here, got very successful, began working with the blacks who were in Iowa, who were from Iowa. Because when I first got here, as you know, Reverend, blacks from Des Moines didn't get along with blacks from Waterloo. And we still have issues here now. We have a golden opportunity and we never took advantage of it. We are number two in the country for black incarceration of black men. We have the highest lead poison of young kids in the country. Some of the poorest blacks in the country live in Polk County. I didn't say Mississippi or West Virginia. I'm going to say it again. So the poorest blacks in America live in Iowa. So I think, Reverend, I'm trying to answer that question since I came here in the 70s. If a state like this has so much potential, what happened to us? And I really just don't know, but it just hit me now when you asked it, Reverend. If whites worked with us back in 1839, are whites aggressively working with us today? There lies your answer.
Well, I think race is an issue. I'm a former high school English teacher. And I witnessed many things. And Iowa is very progressive. That's one of the reasons my husband and I are here. He's sitting in the back there in the Navy suit. That's my husband, Jack, United States Probation and Parole Officer. We came because it's progressive. But yet, there are people in power who believe that to maintain the position of power, they have to surround themselves with more people that look like them. This is where your generation comes in. You are used to going to school with everyone, where race doesn't matter to you. So if you find your passion, one of your missions should be to make sure that race never matters. And it's about the human race. It is about people and all of us coming together.
Gary?
Can you talk about the founding of the African American Studies program here that you were a co-founder of?
Well, since you are also a co-founder, perhaps you would like to speak about it.
They're paying you to be up there. They stopped paying me to be. Which is to say, we have been working together, some of us, trying to do something.
Well, I came to Iowa State in 1986. I had another career before I came here. I'm baby boomer, involved in the civil rights movement, and then worked in the human relations department, and then worked for the city council of Berkeley, California, and worked for the lieutenant governor of California, worked for a member of the Congressional Black Caucus, and then went back to graduate school, and then got my degree and came to Ames, Iowa. I came here with the understanding that I'd be able to teach a course in African American religion. And I was told, sure, you could do that. There is no such thing here, but if you want to start such a course, you can do that. So I did, and the response to it was sufficiently positive that I looked around and I said, why is it in 1987 that we don't have an African American Studies program at Iowa State University? Well, I began talking with people, including Dr. Jackson, and the response was, that's a great idea, why don't you do that? And Gary happened to be in India that year, and as soon as he got back, he heard, or I told him, I don't know which, that this idea was simmering. And so we got some other folks together and developed a proposal and took it to the college, and they said, sorry, no way. And but then a couple years later, a new provost came to Iowa State, and we went to the proposal with the proposal to him. And he said, well, of course we're going to have an African American Studies program. And so with his support, we were able to get it